The fake badge made a cheap tap-tap-tap against my front door, and her sickly sweet perfume hit before the lanyards did. Two men in blue polos with plastic badges and clipboards stood on my porch trying to square their shoulders like they'd graduated a real academy. "County Code Enforcement," Gut Guy announced while the skinnier one clicked his pen like a nervous metronome. I wiped motor oil off my hands and looked past them to the white pickup at my mailbox, took in the hastily applied magnetic logo, and filed the plate number in my head. "We've got violations here. Commercial vehicle in a residential zone. Unpermitted structures, noise during restricted hours," Gut Guy recited, thrusting a stack of citations at me that smelled more like toner than law. "My name is Marcus Kellerman. I'm a widowed mechanic who inherited Grandma Rose's farmhouse in Millbrook County. 3.2 acres of stone house, weathered barn, and the workshop where I fix engines and keep from breaking. After Sarah died of cancer 2 years back, quiet mornings with gravel crunching under my boots, sawdust in the air, and wind through the oaks felt like oxygen. Rose lived here 60 years, raising chickens and tomatoes on land her father bought when the county was still farms and family names. 5 years ago, the developers wrapped my place in Willowbrook Estates. 200 matching houses, perfect lawns, matching mailboxes, and an HOA to keep them all in judged alignment. Fair enough for them, not for me. Enter Delilah Hutchcraft, 47, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood monarch. White Escalade, designer athleisure, perfume that walks in 2 seconds early. She showed up one Tuesday with a clipboard loaded like a weapon. "Reasoning included your parcel, Mr. Kellerman," she chirped. "You owe $3,200. 30 days to comply or we place a lien." I pulled Grandma's deed. "This land's been ours since 1945. I never joined your HOA. She smiled like a blade. "Reasoning supersedes individual rights. Your unkempt lawn, that commercial vehicle," she pointed at my work truck, "and that unapproved structure, my barn from 1960, violate community standards. I have connections at the county. This can be easy or hard." That night I fanned Rose's papers across the kitchen table, surveys, tax receipts, easements, and found 2 things. Their incorporation paperwork was sloppy, and my southern boundary extended farther than I'd realized. Here's something every property owner should know. Recorded boundary surveys trump subdivision plats when they collide. Always verify with an official survey before swallowing an HOA's claim. 2 mornings later, the fake code men tried their act and left in a hurry when I asked for real IDs. 20 minutes after that, the county clerk told me, "Sir, we don't have an environmental and zoning enforcement department." "Felony impersonation," my hand wrote in the margin of my notebook. 30 minutes later, I was at the sheriff's office with badge photos and the plate. Deputy Martinez ran it. "Registered to Willowbrook Property Management, LLC, he said, glancing up. "Same address as the HOA office." He leaned forward. "Install cameras. People who fake badges escalate." So I did. 4 cameras, 2 obvious, 2 hidden in an oak and behind the barn, all pushing to the cloud. Meanwhile, Delilah spun a smear on Nextdoor. "Emergency meeting to protect our investments from a problematic property owner." Mrs. Patterson, 78, unstoppable, shuffled over with snickerdoodles and intel. "Honey, she's telling folks you're starting an auto salvage yard." "Evidence?" I asked. She snorted. If she wanted a public forum, I'd give her one. I walked into their packed community center with Grandma's deed and 1940s photos of Rose among tomato rows. "I've kept this land responsibly for 80 years, I said, "but I never agreed to your HOA. A ripple went through the room. Delilah yelled for security nobody hired. I handed out photos on my way out and went home to a fresh police complaint. Harassment, disruption. Officer Johnson's body language said he'd heard this song. "Document everything," he advised. At the driveway, he paused. "Property management shares the HOA address. Might be worth checking your lines." Under bright shop lights, I unrolled the old survey. The HOA office sat awfully close to my boundary. If I was right, Delilah hadn't built her power on rules but on my soil. 3 days later, a cream paper. Cease and desist arrived from Henderson and Associates Legal Services. The kind of letterhead that screams 400-hour and Microsoft Word. Immediate cessation of defamation. Interference with lawful operations. Damages exceeding $500,000, it intoned. I called my insurer. "Jim, if someone claims my trees damaged their sidewalk?" He laughed. "Trees aren't liable for being trees. Document everything." Then I did the smartest thing I've done since torquing head bolts. I hired Peterson Land Surveying. Grandma's voice used to say, "Buy truth, even if it costs you." Fog curled over fence posts while the GPS rover chirped. At noon, the crew chief waved me over. "You might want to see this," he said, showing me a staked line 30 feet south of the old one. GNSS is more precise than the 90s gear. That office, half of it sits on your parcel. The ground shifted under my boots. That afternoon, I cross-checked land grants, tax maps, and the HOA's filings. The more layers I added, the clearer it got. They'd built their headquarters on Rose's vegetable garden and banked on nobody checking. Next morning, Delilah parked in my driveway. "This easement is HOA common area," she declared. "Share access with community vehicles." "Ma'am," I said, "this driveway's been private since 1945. Move your car." 15 minutes later, a crew showed up to remove my mailbox. "Violates aesthetics," she told them. I phoned the post office. "Mail obstruction is federal," the supervisor said crisply. "Reinstall wherever you want on your land." That afternoon, I set a cast-iron Kellerman 1945 in concrete. My attorney, David Blackwood, 30 years of property fights, called. They can't enforce rules on non-members. If the office is on your parcel, they've been trespassing. Commercial lease values plus unauthorized improvements, call it significant damages. That night, tires slashed. The visible cameras wore fresh spray paint. The hidden ones caught everything. 2:47 a.m. Delilah directing 2 hoodies, a limp in one man's gait. The insurance adjuster, Rodriguez, watched the clip. 7 similar claims tied to HOA disputes in 6 months, he said. Fraud investigators are interested. While I filed the claim, Delilah called an emergency safety meeting, posted flyers about a dangerous mechanic, and stood up in a community center to warn about industrial conversion. Mrs. Patterson brought cookies and an eye roll. Since when do bullies need evidence? That evening, I took a tape and my new survey to the office lot. The building sat square and illegal on my meets and bounds. The permit file was sloppy. The property tax records were a mess. The county fraud unit called next morning. "We've been tracking Willowbrook Property Management," Detective Williams said, laying out photos of 5 other homes. Vandalism, fake inspections, utility shutoffs, forced sales. "Your footage fits a pattern. Organized harassment to create insurance claims and cheap buyouts." That afternoon, the HOA treasurer, Jake Morrison, slid into a diner booth like a man who'd decided to pull a pin. $50,000 for landscaping improvements that never happened. $30,000 for legal consults that never hit court, he said, pushing a manila envelope full of bank statements. I made copies before she could stop me. Inside, payments to Community Management Solutions, Delilah's LLC, for rent on a building squatting on my land. Checks to Hutchcraft Landscaping, her brother-in-law. Sentinel Security, her nephew. Cash withdrawals that disappeared, nearly $200,000 in 3 years. "Why me?" I asked. "Because I moved here to escape corruption, not fund it," he said. "And because I looked up the office parcel, it's yours. Every contract signed in there. Legally questionable." Driving home, the envelope on the seat, I knew we'd crossed from neighbor spat to county scandal. It wasn't about $3,200. It was about a machine that ate families' savings with a smile and a clipboard. The war room formed in my workshop. Maps pinned over pegboards, bank flows on the tool chest, legal pads by the vise. David brought in Rebecca Torres, a forensic accountant who spots shell companies like a mechanic hears a misfire. "This is the playbook," she said. "Self-dealing vendors, inflated contracts, fake shells." Sarah Polson from the county paper arrived with a recorder, and that hungry look journalists get when truth and timing line up. "I've been mapping HOA abuse statewide," she said. "Your case has evidence most victims never get. We can time the article for maximum impact." Mrs. Patterson took the historian slot, producing photos of Rose's tomatoes exactly where the Escalade sits each morning. Williams looped in the county auditor. Patricia Polson showed us the tax math. I'd been paying taxes on the office footprint. They'd never legally subdivided. 3 other properties tied to Willowbrook showed irregularities. We set a timeline like a convoy plan. File a quiet title action to force claims on my parcel within 30 days. Prepare exhibits for a public meeting owners called Not Delilah. Freeze assets. Line up media. Coordinate with fraud and insurance investigators. Then Delilah broke into my living room with a $50,000 check and the gall to call bribery a generous settlement. I hit record. "So the office is on my land?" I asked. "It can be adjusted," she murmured. "Resolve quietly." Williams called it a prosecutor's dream and told me to expect escalation. He was right. Saturday morning, she filed a restraining order with sworn lies. Monday at 9 a.m., the judge watched the living room footage, dismissed her petition, sanctioned her for abusing the court, and forwarded the file for perjury. An hour later, a real inspector came and left confused. The auto shop was a tidy hobby bench. Meanwhile, at 3 a.m., my hidden cams caught ski masks, planting bags of chemicals by my workshop. The dawn dig revealed labeled fertilizers from a garden center. "Frame for environmental seizure," Williams said, shaking his head. "Good thing you have coverage from multiple angles." Jake weathered his own storm. Delilah threatened to expose his unpermitted deck and report him to insurance. "We'll fix your deck legally after this," I promised. Don't let blackmail work. The next afternoon, she proved just how unhinged she'd become, standing in my living room uninvited with that $50,000 check. "Think about your business," she said, perfume curdling with sweat. "No lawyers. No cameras." I recorded the bribe. David assured me it added another felony to the pile. By evening, business licensing knocked. Legitimate inspector, false complaint. He walked my shop, looked at my license, shrugged at the tidy benches and said, "This complaint seems exaggerated." The propaganda blitz ramped up. Anonymous flyers labeled me dangerous individual, 3 voicemails at midnight promising I'd join my dead wife, robot calls to neighbors warning about industrial conversion. But instead of splintering the neighborhood, it galvanized it. People came by to ask how they could help. Sarah scheduled the article for Monday morning, and 3 TV stations set up to cover the evening meeting. At 4 p.m., Delilah's attorney floated hush money. Transfer the office, $100,000, apology, resignation, relocation. No prosecution, no press. "What about stolen HOA funds?" I asked. "A restitution fund she'd administer," David said dryly. "No. We didn't fight this hard to accept a payout and leave families short. We rehearsed one last time. Survey on screen, bank flows in hands, audio of the bribe queued. Williams ready at the back. The commissioner in row 3 with a legal pad. Mrs. Patterson seated at aisle 7, church best pressed and fury polished. From Friday night's Molotovs to Monday night's microphones, the last 48 hours felt like a bad thriller with better evidence. By dawn after the fire, the safe's contents were drying on my kitchen table, survey, chain of title overlays, bank statements showing rent checks written by the HOA to Delilah's shell for space on my land, the vendor web, and an insurance claim map lined up with vandalism timestamps. And Detective Williams had 2 suspects in cuffs, one with that telltale limp my oak cam loved. 3 anonymous voicemails left overnight moved beyond bluster. "Drop this or you'll regret it. Your wife died easy. Back off or join her." David's voice analyst matched cadence and word choice to Delilah's known calls. The restraining order stunt she filed Saturday morning died under lights Monday. Judge Morrison watched my living room clip of her, crawling through the window with a $50,000 check and dismissed it with sanctions for abusing the court, ordering her to cover my fees and referring perjury to the DA. 10 minutes later, licensing left my shop puzzled. The operation they'd been promised was a clean workbench and a certificate framed on the wall. At noon, Sarah's story went live. How an HOA built its office on a mechanic's land and looted members to pay rent. Views spiked. 3 TV vans pulled onto the lawn. A county commissioner took a seat. At 4 p.m., David relayed Delilah's last offer. Deed me the office. $100K cash, public apology, resignations, relocation in 60 days. If we stayed quiet and no charges were filed. It's a bribery a crime, I said. The families need justice. No thush money. By 6:30 p.m. The community center was beyond capacity. 300 inside. Dozens outside watching Sarah. Live stream in a portable screen. Folding chair squeaked. The air smelled like coffee and nerves. Mrs. Patterson hugged her folder to her chest and squeezed my hand. "Rose would be proud," she whispered. When Delilah's wept in at 7 with 3 shieli. Shocked board members. Her navy suit couldn't tie to the tremor behind her eyes. Routine HOA business only, she declared entothemic. No disruptions from non-members. Commissioner Williams stood with Appolite's mile-sharpened bylaw. The county subserving, he said. Owner's concerns will be heard. Jake rose first, voice shaky and steady. Point of order. We've found serious financial irregularities. Out of order. Delilah snapped, a crack running through her poise. I carried the survey to the lectern, plugged it in the HDMI, and let the projector paint truth on the wall. This is a county-certified GNSS surveyed on 3 weeks ago. I said. It shows the HOA offices it's and land my family has owned since 1945. The ripple became a wave, heads bent forward. Hands raised, whispers sharpened into words. Fabrication, she spat. But the auditor seal on the slide shone under fluorescent lights. I clicked to the next. Rent checks from the HOA's account to Community Management Solutions, Delilah's shell, for space on my parcel. Then the vendor web. Hutchcraft Landscaping, Sentinel Security, Mailbox Store Suites, then an insurance. Claim timeline overlaid with vandalism, daddies and my camera, timestamps. The murmur osado, angry talk. Those funds should have been reserved sand repairs, I said. No Trento your president and contracts to or family. Delilah's voice cracked. Slander. I've dedicated my life to this neighborhood. And Mrs. Patterson stood spine straight as Aphan's post. You dedicated your life to stealing, she said, voice ringing like a bell. I watched Rose plant tomatoes where you park your SUV. This building sits an hour, boys scrowned. Applause rolled across the room. He pulled out my phone, thumbed play, and their voice finished the work. 100K cash, public apology, resignations, relocation in 60 days. If we stayed quiet and the charges were filed. It's a bribeto bury acrim, I see it. The families need justice. No thush money, by 6:30 p.m. The community center was beyond capacity. 300 inside. Dozens outside watching Sarah, live stream in a portable screen. Folding chair squeaked. The air smelled like coffee and nerves. Mrs. Patterson hugged her folder to her chest and squeezed my hand. Rose would be proud, she whispered. When Delilah's wept in at 7 with 3 Shieli. Shocked board members, her navy suit couldn't tie to the tremor behind her eyes. Routine HOA business only, she declared entothemic. No disruptions from non-members. Commissioner Williams stood with Appolite's mile-sharpened bylaw. The county subserving, he said. Owner's concerns will be heard. Jake rose first, voice shaky and steady. Point of order. We've found serious financial irregularities. Out of order. Delilah snapped, a crack running through her poise. I carried the survey to the lectern, plugged it in the HDMI, and let the projector paint truth on the wall. This is a county-certified GNSS surveyed on 3 weeks ago. I said. It shows the HOA offices it's and land my family has owned since 1945. The ripple became a wave, heads bent forward. Hands raised, whispers sharpened into words. Fabrication, she spat. But the auditor seal on the slide shone under fluorescent lights. I clicked to the next. Rent checks from the HOA's account to Community Management Solutions, Delilah's shell, for space on my parcel. Then the vendor web. Hutchcraft Landscaping, Sentinel Security, Mailbox Store Suites, then an insurance. Claim timeline overlaid with vandalism, daddies and my camera, timestamps. The murmur osado, angry talk. Those funds should have been reserved sand repairs, I said. No Trento your president and contracts to or family. Delilah's voice cracked. Slander. I've dedicated my life to this neighborhood. And Mrs. Patterson stood spine straight as Aphan's post. You dedicated your life to stealing, she said, voice ringing like a bell. I watched Rose plant tomatoes where you park your SUV. This building sits an hour, boys scrowned. Applause rolled across the room. He pulled out my phone, thumbed play, and their voice finished the work. 50,000 to make this disappear. The building can be adjusted. The room went still. Even the HVAC seemed to pause. Deputy Martinez stepped forward, badge gleaming. Delilah Hutchcraft, he said calmly. You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, bribery, obstruction of justice, impersonation of officers, and related charges. You have the right to remain silent. The handcuffs clicked. Clean, final. 2 men tried to slip out the back. Plainclothes deputies intercepted them, Kratzky in a familiar limp. Outside, camera lights strobed. Inside, the slow roar of relief became conversation. Commissioner Williams took the mic. Tonight, you witnessed why transparency matters. My office is launching a county-wide HOA review. Jake found courage in full view and moved to dissolve the old structure and elect an interim board committed to open books and competitive bids. Hands shot up, AS rolling like a tide in a place that forgot how to say yes. On the way out, neighbors who'd crossed streets to avoid me stopped, apologized, offered help. How'd you even know where to start? One asked. Same way I fix engines, I said. Read the manual. Write down every step. Don't stop until it runs right. Outside, the office on my soil glowed like a stage set after the show. Tomorrow, the accountants and prosecutors would move in. Tonight, a neighborhood remembered itself. 6 months later, the morning sounded like childhood. Kids' laughter carried on a breeze that still smelled like cut grass and hot gravel. The office that started this became a community hub we now own together. I donated the footprint. The upstairs hosts Mrs. Patterson's From Garden to Governance exhibit. Downstairs holds free legal clinics, seniors' computer classes, and budget night on the big screen so any homeowner can read the numbers without an MBA. Delilah pled to theft, fraud, bribery, perjury, 18 months behind bars, $247,000 restitution, permanent ban from property management. Her shell vendors were unwound. Contracts rebid. Our new board, led by Jake with actual treasurer eyes, cut legitimate costs by 43% while services improved. Property values rose 18%, not because of fear, but because transparency is good business. The county auditor recalculated my taxes. The HOA paid commercial lease damages for squatting. The county's white-collar unit, Williams promoted, charged 3 other property management outfits in adjacent towns after victims sent in our playbook. Sarah's series won awards. A state legislator invited me to testify. The Kellerman Property Rights Act now protects owners statewide from forced HOA membership and shadow liens. My shop is quieter at night and louder with joy. 3 evenings a week. Teenagers in greasy tees learn oil and brakes where I once sorted evidence. We launched a scholarship in Rose's name. The first recipient, a young woman headed to diesel school, grinned bigger than a grill when we handed her the tools set I bought with recovered funds. Sarah, who showed up as a reporter and stayed as a partner, stirs coffee in our stone kitchen mornings in Mark's wedding planning on a calendar that used to read court hearing. The garden where the Escalade parked grows tomatoes again. On Property Rights Day, kids learn foyer isn't scary. Adults learn bylaws are readable. Elders tell how to spot the difference between authority and authoritarianism. Sometimes late, I stand by the oak where my hidden camera watched crimes unfold and listened to crickets, and the weight that sat on my chest for years sits somewhere else. If you're in the middle of your HOA mess, hear me. Document obsessively. Build alliances. There's always a Dot or a Jake on your street. Learn your statutes. Back everything up. Involve the sheriff when a badge gleams wrong. Call the reporter who listens. File the quiet title if ground is in question. Refuse hush money. Bullies count on you being tired, polite, and alone. You're not. Drop your story below and where you're watching from. Your comment might light someone else's fuse. Hit subscribe. Next week's story is a principal who embezzled $400,000 from school fundraisers and forgot the new PTA treasurer was a forensic accountant. From the most transparent, financially honest, and genuinely neighborly community in 3 counties. This is Marcus Kellerman with Rose's Rule. Doing right costs more than doing nothing, but peace is worth every penny. Fixing engines and fixing corruption use the same tools: patience, precision, and the unshakable belief that with enough work, everything broken can run smoothly again.